Good morning, everyone. Today is the day. It's dyno day. I'm off in about an hour from now to go put the car down on the dyno and see what this thing can do with the Jackal 2 now. But just to catch you up to speed, last episode, which is linked up right here, basically what I did is I took a drive and I showed you what a normal driving experience is like on the 4.2 motor here. Then I broke down all the different tuning options available for that engine on the market for you to make a decision for yourself. And then I showed you how to swap your ECU in anticipation of installing your Jackal tune. The game plan for today is I'm going to drive the car over to the dyno shop in a second here with my stock tune installed on my ECU. And I've already done a whole bunch of work in that last episode to make it really easy to swap the ECUs over. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to do a couple of pulls on the dyno, figure out what the car makes right now, and then I'm just going to swap in the Jackal ECU altogether, and we'll do the same thing for a direct, before, and after. Now, my new pal Marco will tell you a little bit more about it later, but I've done some prep work on the car to make sure that I can have a successful day at the shop. So I went through the car, made sure all my fluids were filled up. I checked my spark plugs and made sure there were no vacuum leaks. I just looked everywhere to make sure everything was running in tip-top shape. Prediction time, and I challenge you to get closest to the number 2 without looking at the rest of the video. So jump into the comment section now and give me your prediction for horsepower and torque as the car as it sits right now versus what it's going to be after the tune. Let's see who's closest. I'm going to shoot for 280 horsepower with the car as it sits right now, knowing I do have a couple of mods on here like the fully gutted downpipes and the intake spacers and just like a few little things that might add some power. With the Jackal tune on there, I want to see 300 horsepower to the wheels. Remember, your coupon code to jackalmotorsports.com for $50 off any tune that they offer is still valid. FIA50 is your code. Jump on there, check out some tunes while we head over to the dyno. And we're here at the shop. I'm at SSS Motorsports here in Edmonton. I'm with Marco. Marco, who are you? What do you do here? What do you guys do?
Yeah, so great to have you here. My name is Marco Tassoni. I'm the manager here at SSS Motorsports. Also fortunate enough to drive one of our pro drift cars. Yeah, we're a one-stop shop here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. We do everything from engine building. We obviously have a dyno here. That's what you're here for today. So we do dyno tuning, engine building. We got a paint booth right next to us where we do bodywork, restoration. We do a lot of custom fabrication. Basic stuff like maintenance, oil changes, turbo kit installs, all that sort of stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, and here's the car guy test. What car do you drive?
For the drift car, I drive a Nissan 240SX S14 with a 2JZ engine swap from the Toyota Supra. Makes about 650 wheel horsepower on E85. I don't have any fun street cars right now. I just got a Duramax that I use to tow the drift car around. So
that's amazing.
Mostly the drift car I get to enjoy.
And then bonus question, what year did you get the 240? When it was still cheap?
No. So the 240 is actually new to me. We built that car this last year. But we bought it from one of our employees, Austin, who was just getting out of drifting. So we got a pretty good friend deal.
Yeah, and you've got some amazing cars here. A lot that I wish I had. And I can see a lot of imports, and I'm sure our American watchers are going to be a little jealous because we got access to a lot of these things literally 10 years before they did.
Yep, for sure. This Evo right behind us wouldn't even be legal right now in the States, I don't believe.
Yeah, that's awesome.
2001 or so.
Totally. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so since I'm here for a dyno day, this is my first dyno day. I didn't really know what to expect. You kind of helped me understand a couple of things in my pre-checklist. When a person is coming for the very first time, and it's not really about tuning, they just want to see what their car can make for power, what can they expect out of a dyno day? Like, what do you do? What happens?
Yeah, for sure. It's pretty straightforward. Doesn't take too long. Luckily, with our situation, we have a roller dyno, so setup's pretty easy. Just got to get it up on the ramps, get it strapped down nice and safe. To be properly prepared for the dyno session, to make sure that you're getting accurate numbers, there's a kind of a quick mechanical check over that we like to suggest on the car. So just making sure that you have fresh spark plugs in there, no exhaust leaks. If the car is boosted or has a turbo, no boost leaks or anything like that. Just the basics like that to kind of make sure that the car is ready and that you're going to get an accurate dyno reading from the car. Totally.
And you know what, that checklist really helped me out because yesterday I took some time and I found that, I actually broke something in the process, but it was good because it was like on the point of failure, and I just grabbed the suction pump on our car sort of behind the intake manifold, and it just snapped off in my hands.
Oh, there you go.
And unfortunately I couldn't get a new one in time, so I JB welded it back together for now, but it's totally fine.
That works.
Yeah,
for sure.
So that was very worthwhile. What can someone expect in terms of cost for doing a dyno day where you're just trying to find out what power it is?
Yeah, so typically the charge for baseline pulls on the dyno is 200 plus GST. That includes the setup, strapping the car down. That's where we get you basically 3 pulls to kind of give you like either an average or like what was the highest power pull. Sometimes we like to do our 3 pulls kind of in a certain order. So you get the first pull done, see what power it makes. Do a second pull right after to see how efficient the car is with cooling and heat soak and stuff like that. And then the third pull, we'll give it a little bit of time to cool off to see if it picks up any power or anything like that.
Gotcha. Yeah. And if it was a custom tune, I take it there would be a lot more pulls and a lot more kind of playing around, right?
Yeah. So a custom tune, like a full standalone tune where we actually have our tuner on the laptop making adjustments. In that situation, it's a full day thing. Sometimes a lot of these cars are just being freshly built, so you're also working out some kinks on the dyno at the same time. So sometimes you'll even see a car have to kind of come off the dyno to get some, to make some adjustments to things or to fix certain things that aren't working. So a little bit more of a process in those situations. But yeah, it's quite a few hours of just tuning and dialing things in, and typically the day gets more and more exciting the further you get into it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. We're in the dyno room. What are we working with here? Yeah,
so this right here is a Dynacom 15,000 FX. It's a all-wheel drive roller style dyno, so it makes setup pretty easy. We can basically run 1,500 horsepower per axle on this dyno, so up to 3,000 horsepower all-wheel drive. Yeah, the typical correction that we use on this dyno is a J1349. It's a standard type correction. Some dynos will use slightly different correction. They'll use like an SAE standard type correction. This is just the correction that Dynacom recommends to us.
Awesome. Okay, and how about a prediction for power today? So FYI, I don't know how many of these S4s you've tuned before.
Not a lot. Ali has done more of the German stuff than I have. He does some Eagle Eye tuning, so he sees Germans a lot more than I do.
Okay, so this thing's rated at 344 crank. Yeah, all-wheel drive.
Yeah.
And let's just say maybe at best I've added 10 horsepower for aftermarket mods. Where do you think we're going to land for power?
Well, assuming 20% drivetrain loss from the crank and we're going to measure at the wheels, we're probably going to be, I'd have to say, like 330, 320, that area for the upgraded one.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think?
For the stock horsepower?
Yeah.
You're probably just under 300, I'd have to say, like 295.
Okay, I guessed 280 this morning. Yeah, and the aftermarket tune, I guess we'll see. It's supposed to put on, could be anywhere up to like 30 crank horsepower in the end.
Yeah.
So I was hoping for 300 wheel horsepower. That's my goal for today.
Okay, awesome. Yeah,
we'll see.
Let's see what happens.
Pull gear, fourth gear, here we go. Okay, so what just happened there is it came out to be about 200, so it might be down on power, and I was just chatting with Ali, the tuner who's doing the dyno, and we don't know if a different correction needs to be made or what, but we're gonna do it again and see what the number is. We just finished 2 baseline pulls, actually, and we're seeing some numbers that are kind of weird, to be honest. I think first run was around just barely over 200, and the second one was like 206 or something like that. But the car feels good, but I'm with Ali, who is running the dyno today, and we're just gonna take a quick look at the numbers. What are we seeing?
Your standard power reading, horsepower and torque. Solid line being horsepower, dotted line being the torque. The first run in black surprised us both, I think.
Yeah.
It should be definitely in the high 200s based on others we've done. And,
yeah.
based on, let's say a 25% drivetrain loss, maybe at the most. Being these cars crank horsepower around 340.
Yeah.
So, we should have saw roughly 280, maybe.
That's what I was hoping for, but
260 or something like that.
Yeah.
But again, we can only go by what the numbers are showing us. We don't have any correction factors or anything like that on here, so we don't like to fudge the numbers. But I think it should be putting down quite a bit more than that.
Totally. And I guess the X factor here is that, for me driving over today and you just kind of sitting in the seat on the dyno, like it feels good. Like it feels healthy. It's not like we're hearing like misfires and we're not, like there's nothing to tell us that something might be wrong.
Correct.
So I think what we're going to do is assume that things are okay, that the engine's healthy enough to continue. And really what this is going to become is a test of differential. So despite the fact that I hit a max of 206.5 horsepower and 227 foot-pounds of torque, we're going to take our lumps, and I've already swapped in the other ECU, so we'll go ahead and do a fourth gear pull all the way up to 7,500 this time, which is screaming loud for the record. I've never been in a dyno room and I was just like, oh my God, my ears. So next time I'm going to bring earplugs.
Earplugs will get you some.
Totally. And what we're going to be looking for is just the difference. Okay, here comes first pull on the tune. That was pull one. It still has to adapt, so we're going to do it again. Picked up a little power. We're gonna turn on the pops and bangs, and we'll go for a third one here, see what the average comes out to be. Back in the garage, and that was a very exciting day, and some unexpected things happened. But let me just break down what you just saw. So when we got to the dyno and loaded up the car, we did that first baseline pull, and right away we noticed that the numbers were quite low, right? We saw low 200s there, and that was 60 to 80 horsepower off of where I kind of thought it would be, and those guys too. And that's when we started talking about whether the dyno was calibrated correctly. And we have every reason to believe that it was, because they recently had another all-wheel drive car, a Subaru, on there, and it put down exactly the amount of power that they really would have expected. So we did not change anything. I just want to be really clear, throughout the baselines and after into the tuning pulls, we did not change absolutely any settings on the dyno whatsoever, because I wanted to make sure that no matter what happened, the results were consistent. So then we moved on to the second baseline pull, because we needed a bit of a gut check on what was going on, but also the car still felt really good and sounded really good, despite the fact that something was obviously wrong. And we saw that again, the results were a couple horsepower better, probably just the ECU adapting, but it was still low 200s, right? So we had to make a call for the day of whether we wanted to continue or not. And I felt like we should. You know, all evidence was that the car was healthy enough to go on, and we did some data logging to see that there was no knock. Most of the cylinders were pulling, just a couple of degrees of timing, but nothing critical. By the numbers appeared to be wrong, so I said, let's keep going. At that point, you saw us move on to the Jackal pulls, and it needs to do multiple runs to actually adapt. Truthfully, we probably could have done like 4 or even 5, but we sort of called it quits at the end of the day, not totally knowing what was going on. So the first pull was a little bit lower than the best stock one that we saw. Number 2, we saw a really nice gain. Number 3 had even a little bit more, and then we turned on the pops and bangs just for fun at the end there, and we called it a session. But what's really important is the data. So let's go check out what the dyno graphs say and keep a couple of things in mind. One, let's assume that the dyno and the tune itself is fine and that there is in fact something wrong with the car. But let's look at the differences in the graphs, not what the totals are. First, look at what the stock curves look like using the example from earlier. We can see that the torque does indeed peak early at an average of 3,400 RPM. After that, it takes a dive towards 5,000 RPM, which, as we know, is when the vacuum solenoid at the front of the intake manifold is supposed to trigger, allowing the intake flap to drop down and let the short runners feed air into the engine. That's why we see that the torque rebounds after 5,000 RPM, but ultimately continues to fall off into the top of the RPM range. Horsepower starts out in a similar fashion to torque in that it ramps up quickly till about 4,200 RPM till it plateaus hard near 5,000. Again, the change in airflow in the intake manifold helps bring power back to life and allow horsepower to peak at 6,000 RPM before falling off again. So for better or worse, this is the baseline curve we can compare against, and generally speaking, it's really nice to visually understand when the engine is making power. Now we're looking at my best stock pull of the day, which is in blue, versus my best tune pull of the day, which is in green. Right off the bat, we can validate that when Jackal advertises that there are power gains over the entire set of stock curves, that is true. The largest areas of improvement are unsurprisingly near the peak power RPMs, but there are nice gains along the majority of the curves too. What's also apparent is that Jackal has done a really nice job smoothing out the abrupt and harsh power dip that used to be near the 5,000 RPM mark when the manifold flap drops. It looks like they were able to keep the curves smoother and power higher by opening the flap a few hundred RPM sooner, which is pretty clever. Leading up to the flap opening, we see both the horsepower and torque simply comes on stronger, earlier, especially the torque. It's practically a vertical line around 2,200 RPM, and the bigger lumps are smoothed out on the way to peak torque. The curve smoothing is also in effect for the entire horsepower curve and is really obvious on the top end after 6,400 RPM. Last, for the peak number comparison, I did net 12 all-wheel horsepower and 13 all-wheel foot-pounds of torque. Again, take those numbers with a giant grain of salt because, as stated, the curves in their entirety are off by a huge margin. There you have it. Not exactly the outcome I was expecting, but there are some very important takeaways here. First, the onus of the performance is on me, not on the tune. In fact, credit to the tune, it did really well. It was for sure sandbagged by the issues with the car that we have to figure out, but we still saw a really nice improvement in horsepower and torque, and the graph looks way better. The other thing is go find an all-wheel drive dyno shop in your city and take your car there. It is not expensive, it is super fun to do, but most importantly, it gives you really useful information. Like I said in my road test in the first episode, I did have the sense that I was missing a little top-end power, but I wouldn't have known. If you would have told me, no, that's normal, I wouldn't have guessed because that's the difference between the butt dyno and the actual dyno. Last, although I will do a compression test right away to see if that loss of power is coming from the combustion chamber in some form or fashion. Matt and I are most interested to know what's going on with the intake manifold actually, because I did do the flapper mod, and who knows if I mess something up. It doesn't seem coincidental that the biggest discrepancy in the results that we're supposed to be seeing is after the RPM where the flap is supposed to drop. So potentially there's a bad seal there, or I just did something wrong, and that could be the big contributor to our problem here. So I need to dive into that. All of this means there will be a third part to this series, and that's totally fine with me. It was really important that I didn't change or hide any of the information related to this process here, much like we didn't recalibrate the dyno on the fly to make things look normal again. This is the reality of owning a modified car and how things, go wrong, and you got to figure stuff out the further you go on that journey. The thing is, this car is going to bed for the winter like right now. So I'm going to spend a couple months here working on the problem, and first thing in the spring, I'm going to head back to SSS Motorsports and we're going to put it back on the dyno, and we're going to get some closure on what this mystery issue is and finally figure out what the true results are on that Jackal Stage 1 tune that I have. Along with that video, I'll give you an updated road test, but I can already say it's actually pretty fun to drive around with this tune. I personally didn't think I'd be a fan of the pops and bangs, but they're actually pretty subtle, and it's just kind of cool to come off throttle and hear a little pop, 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 pop coming off the freeway. As always, thank you so much for watching. I had a blast making this series. Thank you once again to Jackal Motorsports and Matt Barrington for making all of this possible, and I can't wait to get back into this project again soon. Please like this video, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you again soon. And because, you know, you can do anything in an outro, you know what you're gonna see me working on again soon? Well, I'll give you a little hint here. What's been sleeping in the background for some time? What's that?